welcome to the, well, first game. Actually, this is the first game in round 2. This is, gonna decide who Gobbo King is gonna face in the final, which is very interesting. It's Indypride versus Jontaun. Jontaun here is playing as the Empire, which could be tough. He's against the Vampire counts, and that can be pretty tough. He's definitely got an uphill climb here. His blind picks, so, you know, he didn't know he was in for this. So here you can see he's got some Outriders. Outriders are a fantastic tool here, because they're ranged, great armor piercing, they get some good dense fire into very scary units, but also run away. It's very difficult to catch them out with zombies like you can for handgunners or something like that. So having some mobile ranged is very useful in this matchup. Also, he has some spearmen dotted around to try and help sort of split up and pin down the front line. Also some flagellants, being unbreakable, they're going to hold for a long time, which is very useful. He also has some Grail Knights with halberds for taking care of the large units, and he has a Warrior Priest here for some good buffs. So the Warrior Priest, you know, very useful. His abilities never used to be AoE, they never used to buff support, you know, they weren't support abilities, they were just for himself. But he's less selfish now, so that's great. So suddenly, he brings a lot of utility to the table. And as well as the Warrior Priest, well, we have the legendary Lord Warrior Priest, we have the Grand Theogonist, Volkmar the Grim. So Volkmar the Grim, fantastic, I think. He regenerates, which is really useful, especially in an atrocious battle. But also, you know, he's got some great buffs, you know, great attack abilities. So, Grand Hammer Sigmar is going to really help nearby unit to get some more attack in. And just like we've seen with the Greenskins against the Vampire Count, it's better to kill things quickly. So attack buffs are always really useful to help get more value out of your guys, kill things quicker to get over that massive healing that Vampire Counts bring. Also, he can add damage resistance to nearby guys, and Grand Soulfire does a big AoE damage effect, which is great, but it also adds magic resistance, so you can use it defensively as well as offensively, which I think is great. So Volkmar, very useful. He's also got magic and fire damage, which will help against ethereal units or anything that can regenerate, which is a lot of units in the Vampire Count's roster. So very nice there indeed. Also he has the Royal Altdorf Griffite, so more Grail Knights. So yeah, along with these guys, he's got a lot of good armor piercing and anti-large at his disposal. Also, just to fill in some more gaps, he has Empire Knights, and the Empire Knights, they got pretty good charge, nice heavy. They can help sort of fold things like Graveguard, get a lot of good damage there, a lot of good punch. And they're armoured enough that they can withstand a lot of, you know, attacks from a lot of units, so pretty useful. Also, you can't really fight Vampire Counts without a Bright Wizard. The Bright Wizard here, you see, he's got 2 great spells. So Fireball, he'll be able to just keep hitting enemies with some good damage there. But also the Flaming Sword of Ruin is great, because I've already said magic and fire damage are both super useful. But it's also going to add weapon damage and missile damage. So anything you cast that on, suddenly they could be able to do a lot of damage to ethereal units, to anything that regenerates, and it's just going to add more damage. So stack that on top of the melee attack buffs, things are going to be hitting more and for more damage. So pretty cool indeed. So Indypride here, he's got a pretty standard army. So you can see here he has Blood Knights. He's gone with Khan Wraiths, which is a risky pick, you know, especially considering Flaming Sword of Ruin is almost guaranteed to be brought to the table. You're going to have magic, just in case there are ethereal units. So that is a risky pick, but they are very good. They cause terror. They're very cheap for a terror-causing unit, and as long as they're not fighting anything with magic, it's very hard to kill them. It's almost impossible when there's any healing nearby. So his lord is Manfred von Carstein, so death magic and Law of Vampires is very scary. You know, he can summon a load of things and use Spirit Leech. Soul Blight he's got as well to lower armor and combat effectiveness. Very scary. Also, Varix Reavers are very formidable, really nice. They regenerate, and they just do a lot of damage on the charge. Really good utility, will really help bowl over a load of the cheaper infantry, especially Flagellants will take a ton of damage on the charge, because they just don't have the mass to withstand, you know, something like Varix Reavers. He also has some Fellbats to chase down and bog down any ranged units, any, you know, cannons or anything like that. He's got a load of Skeleton Warriors, which is very nice to help muck things up. He's got the Sternsmen, which will regenerate and have good anti-infantry, as well as good shields as well. A lot of good shields in this line. So a lot of Graveguard as well, and some more Blood Knights. So pretty formidable, very scary army here. So we are going to speed things up and see how this pans out. So, at the moment you can see the Outriders are trying to find something decent to shoot at, but everything is just shielded and scary. So he's moving everything to one side, trying to get an in here to get some damage into these Blood Knights, because he's got to shut these guys down early or they could get massive value. Any charge they get off, they will get a lot of damage in. So here, it looks like he's just going for the bats at first, so they can't keep chasing things down. Here you can see the Blood Knights are pushing up, and Jontaun is having to pull back. This is too wide an army. He can't stop everything. He doesn't have enough infantry to pin down everything, and with all these Blood Knights on the prowl, he can't really afford to charge the Empire Knights into anything. They're just going to get countercharged by the far superior Blood Knights. But here, it looks like the Fellbats are basically, they've basically had it, so that's something. And it looks like Indypride is pushing back here. He is trying to pull back and rearrange so he can basically pick his targets. So here, the Khan Wraiths seem to be moving around the back. Blood Knights are poised on this side, so that way he can't choose to go to the other side of the battlefield to avoid the conflict. But, with all the Demigryph Knights, he could overwhelm one side, I think. Obviously, a lot of these units can move in to try and help, but I think a hit and run, trying to catch out the Blood Knights, or even just knowing that the Skeleton Warriors can be bowled over very quickly, charge them. The Blood Knights won't want to get involved in that fight on their own, so they're going to leave the Skeleton Warriors to get killed. That can often be a good strategy. Just get damage in where you can, but always with enough stuff nearby to make it too much of a threat to come to the aid of something. But I mean, Skeleton Warriors, they're not that expensive. They're not that good, but they're going to bog things down, so it's just more units available to slip in through the gaps and cause hassle. So you want to shut down any unit you can. So here you can see that is what Jontaun is doing. He is charging into the Skeleton Warriors, and you can see immediately they are in trouble. That was very quick indeed. But you can see a Soul Blight has gone down to lower all of their armor, and armor is something that the Knights really need to stay alive. And now you can see the Blood Knights are charging through to try and get into these Spearmen. Still more retreating, basically. Jontaun doesn't have a comfortable engagement to jump into, so he's having to just whittle away at things and pin what he can while he tries to find a good in, something he can catch out to do some serious damage, because these Blood Knights need to go. But Indypride is just not letting them get caught out, so it's going to be very difficult indeed. There are a load of Outriders poised, but with the terrain being this sort of wobbly, it's quite difficult to get good line of sight on these valuable units. So that is very tough indeed. So here you can see zombies are being summoned just to help muck things up, and it means that counter-charges can't happen as effectively, because they have to charge through the zombies first. So here you can see the Skeleton Warriors are getting another charge, but the Varix Reavers are charging in the back, and the Varix Reavers have a good enough charge to get through a lot of that armor. Flaming Sword of Ruin has been procced to try and bolster these guys, but the Spearmen have already buckled, and the Knights are having to retreat away from this because the Blood Knights are on their way, along with these Khan Wraiths. Though the Khan Wraiths being caught out, in a group of units with Flaming Sword of Ruin, they're not going to last very long. So that could help. That could definitely help. So here, the Warrior Priest is having to fall back with the Demigryphs to try and keep this side safe. So it's looking very dangerous. The Varix Reavers are just completely pressing forward to try and keep on these Empire Knights. They're really struggling. So here, Grand Soulfire, not the best target there. It was a bit on the outskirts, and it did miss the Khan Wraiths, unfortunately. But the Royal Altdorf Gryphites are taking a lot of damage here. A lot of spells are being used by Manfred that are going to do a lot of damage that can't really be recovered. There's no life magic on the field here. So suddenly, the Empire don't really have any opportunity to heal up these expensive units. So any death magic is going to whittle things down, and you're not going to be able to recover from that. So here you can see the Blood Knights and the Varix Reavers. There's a lot of power here. Actually, sorry, these are both Blood Knights. Varix Reavers still over here. Being gunned down, actually. Looks like they're going to lose. But 2 units of Blood Knights are too much for the Altdorf Gryphites, and the Khan Wraiths are in here. Almost indestructible, seeing as how there's no magic damage on the field. Apart from Voltmar, actually, but he's going to be hitting Blood Knights a lot instead of that. It's not enough. He is not enough. And now a Spirit Leech has been cast on him. He does have some magic resist, which is definitely useful. It will keep him alive a lot longer, and he does regenerate. So Spirit Leech on him isn't necessarily going to be the best thing in the world. I think maybe the Warrior Priest would be a better target, just so you can't keep, buffing with one unit and then buffing with the next. So it would limit the amount that the Empire can do to keep their buffs going. So I think that might have been a better shout. But Voltmar is mounted, and with Manfred coming in and all the anti-large of the Blood Knights, it's looking pretty bad for him, especially because the Altdorf Gryphites just can't withstand this damage from all the Khan Wraiths. That is very tough. So Flaming Sword of Ruin went down, but too late, so the Khan Wraiths have once again avoided that. The other side of the battle, everything is just bogged down, basically, but the Vampire Counts are just winning. They're just winning through it, they can get healed and the Empire can't. So the Empire, with their pretty feeble units of just spearmen, they're getting killed. They're getting killed very quickly. It is not ideal. And here, Voltmar is incredibly bogged down. There's not a lot he can do to get out of this engagement, and it looks like he might break. So that isn't good. That is not good at all. Voltmar, if he's on his, the War Altar, then maybe he'd have more mass to get out, he'd be unbreakable, and he'd have a banishment that he could drop on a lot of the units to help. But I think just on a horse, it's not enough. He's not survivable enough, and he's been really caught out, and he's being punished for it. So that is a pity. So here, Invocation and a Heck on all these units, and a Fireball coming in to try and do some damage to what he can, but The Khan Wraith is just going to be too much. And unfortunately, the Bright Wizard, despite being a wizard, he doesn't have magic attacks in melee. He has to use his spells to get those. And now all the cavalry is having to push back just to try and, again, find an in. But the vampire counts in the balance of power is far in their favour now. And there's just no infantry left to really bog these units down. So this whole surge of vampire count units and the almost indestructible Khan Wraiths is pretty rough. And I think with that fireball, that was a last-ditch effort of what little Winds of Magic he had left. I'm not sure he has another spell in him. Unfortunately, though, the Warrior Priest and Voltmar, with those Soulfires, you know, the Grand Soulfire, you can actually do a lot of damage to Khan Wraiths with that AoE ability, but he just wasn't able to get on top of him, so the Khan Wraiths here are just having a whale of a time. Not many kills, but those are all against Royal Altdorf Griffites and similar units, so suddenly they look a lot more formidable. So it's not ideal. So here, Jontaun is trying to form up to weather this storm, but he doesn't really have many options. He's still got Outriders with plenty of ammo, but you can see they haven't been able to fire much. I think they've had line of sight blocked a lot by these hills, so they just haven't been in the right positions. So here, he's charging forward with everything. He basically knows it's over at this point. He's trying to use the attack buffs of the Warrior Priest so everything can do some damage. Here, the Grand Soulfire doing some work to what he can, but again, misses the Khan Wraiths. And that terror is going to start hitting. You see here, the Empire Knights are terrified. All the attack buffs and all the defensive buffs just aren't enough to withstand this. There's just too much strength left in the vampire count line. That you just can't weather that. So here's some spearmen are coming back in, but I got a feeling that things are going to be over before they can get back in here. And there we go. Jontaun knows that, and so he's called that a day. It can definitely be a tough matchup, for sure. Vampire counts have just such great tools to deal with the Empire, and it can be pretty straightforward to do so. You can tie down all of those really high damage things in the back line, so you're forced to have to use Knights. But then of course Blood Knights, with their anti-large, are just really good at dealing with things like Empire Knights, and all the healing, it just helps tip those engagements in their favour. So unless you have a lot of guns or something to support, you can't usually win those engagements as the Empire. And unfortunately, it's risky to bring guns because of all the zombies. And yeah, with Manfred von Carstein, with all his death magic in the fold as well, he can just do so much damage to those things. And because there's a threat of Imperial units and there's all that regeneration, you really want to bring a Bright Wizard, then that means you don't have the Law of Life, so you can't heal up your own elite units. So your hands are pretty tied as the Empire. It can be very difficult indeed. But Jontaun is a hell of a player, so we'll see if he can claw it back in the next battle. It should be an interesting one. So, yeah. Well played, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. And here we are in our second match between Jontaun and Indypride. Indypride is playing as Chaos, and Jontaun is playing as Bretonnia. So once again, not a favourable matchup for Jontaun here. He has really got an uphill battle, and this could knock him out. You know, this is the second game, he's 1-0 down, so he has everything to play for in this one. So Indypride here, you can see he has Chaos Warriors on the sides. Chaos Warriors just have such formidable stats and a huge amount of armor for a frontline fighter. Really good melee defense at 44. They are very tough to kill. And those silver shields means you can't just whittle them down with peasant archers or something like that either. Very tough to kill. And that is going to give peasants a lot of pause for thought. It's going to be very difficult to get through these guys with anything other than your cavalry. But there are a load of Chaos Warriors with halberds. He has 3 units of Chaos Warriors with halberds, so that huge anti-large and armor piercing is going to cut through knights very quickly. So they're going to need to get bogged down, or else the knights are doomed, basically. And if it wasn't bad enough, this other unit on the side is actually a unit of Chosen with halberds. So think Chaos Warriors with halberds, only way better. That's what he's facing, so that is tough. So a lot of anti-large. Also, Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows is really going to help with Enfeebling Foe and Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. Melkoth's, that can slow down an enemy as well as doing damage to it, so you can slow the retreat down of any knights that come in. So that is tough. That is tough. You don't want that happening. You know, you don't want your knights to be caught out. You want to keep them moving, keep them charging and pulling away. But also there's Enfeebling Foe, so if anything does get caught out, you can lower their combat stats, and it allows everything to get more damage in, and it stops them from being able to damage you in kind. So suddenly, you know, it's going to be tough for knights here. A lot of anti-large, and frankly, knights are the only things that are going to punch through all of these Chaos Warriors. Peasants just don't have the armor piercing to get through this stuff. Also, if it wasn't bad enough, there's also a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, so more huge armor piercing anti-large. And I mean, look at him. It's just so formidable. There's no way you want to fight this, really. So you want to whittle it down at range, hopefully. But mean, Bretonnia don't have a lot of great ranged units. I mean, they have some very cheap, affordable, very cost-effective things in the Peasant Bowmans, but you've got to be able to keep them safe, and against all this stuff, it's going to be difficult. Also, Kolek Suneater is the Lord, and he's obviously going to pack an absolute wallop, and yeah, he's just the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, only far better, far more armor, and he has Lord of the Storm, so he can summon lightning from the sky to smite people, which... it hurts. It hurts a lot. Against Grail Knights, it does cause magical damage, so it'll negate that physical resist. It's just very hard to shrug off that kind of damage. So if you can get a couple of good hits on anything that's surrounded or bogged down, that is going to do a lot of work. So that is going to be very, very scary for Jontaun. And otherwise, he could just hit massive blobs of peasants to help the Chaos Warriors cut through them so he can reposition them to block something else. Because this army is quite small. It will be outnumbered. And if we look at the figures, before we look at Jontaun's army, you can see that Jontaun has 1,000 more troops than Indypride here, which is a little bit silly. Also, he has the Soul of Damnation. So Hell Cannons, very powerful. They do magic damage, so that's going to help against things like Grail Knights, provided you can hit them. It's not the most accurate thing in the world, and Knights are obviously going to be very quick. He's going to want to keep them moving a lot, but this could do a lot of damage, an awful lot of damage. So that is definitely scary if he can keep that safe and firing for the whole fight. So Jontaun's army, incredibly wide. He has gone with a huge amount of numbers because he has to be able to just bog down everything and allow his knights to keep charging sort of at their leisure, you know, without Chaos being able to sort of get in position to stop those charges. So here we see Grail Knights, the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis, and more Grail Knights. So huge amount of very good cavalry here, but he's going to need them. He also has the Fey Enchantress, so he's going to have Regrowth and Earthblood, which means he's going to be able to heal up those really good units. So hopefully, if he can keep these guys away from the artillery, they should be able to keep their model count nice and high and keep them fighting. So pretty damn cool to see. So Fey Enchantress as well does have Mist of the Lady, so as soon as she's in combat with something, it'll have a Mortis Engine effect, essentially. So it'll damage things nearby to her, as well as lowering their combat stats slightly. But it is risky. She is not a good duelist. You don't want her to be in combat, especially when Kolek is on the prowl. So it's going to be tough whether or not he'll be able to really make use of that ability. So also you see Spearmen at Arms, Peasant Mobs, more Spearmen. He has some Foot Squires. He has 4 units, in fact. So the 5. He has 5 units. Is that 6? No, he has 5. 5 units of Foot Squires. So these guys, good armor piercing, anti-infantry, not as good combat stats generally as the Chaos front line, but that armor piercing will definitely help, and there's enough of them. They outnumber the Chaos front line themselves. Also, 1 unit of Peasant Bone with Pox Arrows. That poison will help. It'll slow things down, and it'll get some good damage in, and it'll lower their combat effectiveness. So poison, very useful. And of course, more Peasant Mobs and Spearmen, sort of to muck things up a bit. So that is the army, and let's see what happens to it. So straight away, Jontaun is hiding the Fey Enchantress behind a big rock. So not the most sort of brave start to the fight, but like I said, he's at the disadvantage here. It is very difficult to punch through all that armor. I mean, the Grail Knights, very good units, really good on the charge, but they don't have a lot of armor piercing, so you need that charge bonus to be able to get that damage in. You need the impact from the charges to be able to punch through the armor of Chaos, and there's just so much armor in this build. It is very scary. And of course, with the cannon firing, he has no choice but to get in here and start mucking things up. It's going to be very difficult to time all this, especially under all this fire. A lot of units are going to get very hurt by the Hell Cannon before they can get engaged. So with all the terror on the field, there's no Grail Reliquary to make things immune to psychology, so they're just going to run away, basically, from all this terror. There's a lot of scary things here. You know, Kolek and the Shaggoth, you don't want to fight that. It's terrifying. So it's not going to help much. Over here, though, you can see the Hell Cannon has missed a fair few shots so far, which is impressive. The Bretonnians have managed to avoid it somehow. So another Hell Cannon shot coming in, and not a bad hit. Done some damage to the Pox Arrows. Pox Arrows don't have great leadership. You can see it's more than halved from that one shot. And a few of them are dead, but it's nothing much yet. Another hit just between units. This Hell Cannon is actually performing pretty terribly right now. It's usually more accurate than this, so Jontaun is definitely lucky here. That might be a good omen for the battle. Or it might just be, yeah, building his confidence for no good reason, because Hell Cannon's hurt. So you can see cavalry are trying to poise around the outside, and honestly, I think the Soul of Damnation is probably better used to shoot at the Grail Knights. Just keeping the pressure on these guys. Any hit, it'll kill a good few models. and you can't heal them up if they start losing models. They're going to lose effectiveness very quickly if that's the case. You know, no amount of regrowth is going to help if they're already dead. So here you can see the Fey Enchantress is moving in, but of course halberds are moving in to try and block that. Chaos Warriors have barely been scratched, and they're being shot at as well as attacked by peasants, but the peasants aren't going to make a dent in them, honestly. So Fey Enchantress apparently looks like she's chasing everyone here, which is interesting. So he pulled away to avoid Kolek from getting any hits in. He doesn't want to commit just yet. So here a Melkoth has hit the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis, and that's going to slow down their charge. So the impact there was kind of awful, honestly. It wasn't a great charge. And now the halberds are on top of them, and he has to pull away. Look how much damage they've taken already, just from a couple of hits from the Shaggoth and the Melkoth hitting them. Here, all the other knights are poised to try and find an in. Here, Lord of the Storm is going to hit these foot squires. The other foot squires are already broken. And, yeah, these Chaos Warriors are still on half health. So it's not looking good for the front line. And here, beautiful hit. And it did kill a Grail Knight, so that is a start. That is definitely a start. It wasn't the cleanest hit, but it did alright there. It did alright. Shadow Wizard, still totally fine. Kolek's barely taken a scratch. The Shaggoth, he's just making sure that none of these knights dare come into this fight. And the peasants are slowly wrapping around and pinning more things down. But in the front, most of the peasants are breaking already. They will come back, but it's not looking good. Kolek, he's under a lot of fire from the peasant bowmen, and that damage will add up if he doesn't shut them down soon. Grail Knights did decide to run in and decide to run out again, seeing the Hell Cannon firing at them. So looks like the Fey Enchantress is moving in to try and help, which is definitely a bold move. And here the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis are fighting everything in the back line, but this is not looking good. There are a lot of halberds here. The Chaos over here, the Chosen, Chaos Chosen over here, yeah, they'll fight foot squires, but actually this is good for the foot squires. A lot of the expense of the Chosen with halberds is that anti-large bonus, and of course the foot squires don't need to worry about that. They're not large units. So this is actually a fairly cost-effective exchange, and it's a good way to pin down these Chosen, because you definitely don't want them fighting your knights. So here, more charges coming in to try and break these Chaos Warriors. One unit of Chaos Warriors with halberds here, and the other Chaos Warriors have broken. But there's a lot that has come to the defense of the Hell Cannon, because he wants to keep this Hell Cannon online until it runs out of ammunition, at least. So, yeah, you definitely want that to happen. But so many peasants bogging all this down, and here we are going to see a beautiful Comet of Cassandora coming from the Fey Enchantress. She has that as a bound spell, the Chalice of Potions, so she can, I think, use it twice in a battle. So that is one, and it did a huge amount of damage to all of these units. And now the peasants have a bit of a fighting chance. I still don't like the chances, but it helps. It's definitely going to help. There's a lot of damage on the halberds, and it's going to give the knights a huge amount of respite if the halberds can get taken care of. So here, the Chosen did finally defeat the Foot Squires. A brave charge from the Grail Knights trying to come in here to do some work. And it is killing a few models, and it's letting the peasants get on top of it, and hopefully the Grail Knights can get away without having taken too much damage. Unfortunately, though, all the peasants over here get terrified away as the Shaggoth and Kolek run in to try and deal with these Grail Knights. Now the Grail Knights are struggling to get through all these halberds. More infantry are coming to back them up and bog these halberds down, but that was a lot of pressure on the Grail Knights there. Luckily, still a very healthy unit over here. And it looks like these Chosen are... Nope, they're still actually quite comfortable. Surprisingly so. Their leadership is so good. It's very difficult. But you can see he's going at them with everything. They're secluded, there are no Shaggoths in support, so if he can kill these Chosen, or at least make them rout, he can chase them off the battlefield with something. Probably the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis, who have the lowest amount of health out of all the knights, and actually they're the least... competitive, the least, combative of the units. The Grail Knights are definitely superior. So here, that's the biggest anti-large threat besides the Shaggoths that you can kind of run away from. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good to get rid of those. Oh, it looks like he's not chasing them down, which is very interesting. So he's coming in here to try and get a rear charge on these Chaos Warriors by the looks of it. Yep, it's going to be a beautiful charge if he can get a nice one here. So pretty good. Not bad. Damage mounting. Not a huge amount of models dead, but pretty good. That's some good damage, and the Fey Enchantress running in while the Dragon Ogres are busy. She's safe to get in there and lower their combat stats, which should definitely help. Huge mobs of infantry are running in here to try and bog this stuff down, and they are broken. They just can't handle the pressure of all of these knights charging in one after another, and unfortunately the Shaggoths can't be everywhere. So they're there trying to kill some Grail Knights, although it looks like they got rid of the defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis. Poor souls. Anyway, this is pretty good for Bretonian now. There's not much left. Obviously, the Soul of Damnation still has a couple of models, but they're bogged down by all this infantry. They're not going to be able to fire the cannon, and he really needs that cannon to punch through all these guys, because these archers are still firing. So these guys are getting poisoned, and they're trying to fight everything. All this cheap anti-large able to bog them down, and the cycle charging for the Grail Knights, it's going to whittle down their health very, very quickly at this point, because there's nothing else taking the blows. There's no other Chaos infantry left to support or get in the way of these charges or react to them. So the Dragon Ogres are basically on their own. The Shadow Wizard, amazingly, is still going. I'm surprised he wasn't sniped out earlier, but he has been mirroring the actions of the Dragon Ogres for the most part, so it's difficult to commit a lot of decent units into that fight, knowing that the Dragon Ogres can do a lot of work in kind. So it's tough. But yep, now the Chaos Sorcerer is starting to take some pretty substantial damage, and another Lord of the Storm coming in. But most of it was avoided. Some of the peasants got hit by it, and that was enough to terrify them, unfortunately. But most of the cavalry got out of the way of that. So, not the best in the world, but you do what you can, right? Balance of power now, heavily against Chaos, despite having these really tough units. But this one Shaggoth is super injured. Unfortunately, no Pox arrows left. So here, his only chance is to kill the Fey Enchantress to help tip the scales. But she just has too many men to be able to run through and away from. It's tough. It's definitely a tough one. So this Dragon Ogre, super injured. Kolek, super injured. A Mail Cult has been cast on something. Something? What was that? Was it these? Nope. Nope. Okay, I can't even see where that was cast. Oh, it's these guys. Okay, cool. So the Grail Knights had a Mail Cult cast on them, which is definitely wise. You definitely want to keep whittling them down, especially when they're this injured. It's definitely useful. Here, though, the Grail Knights have charged in, and here looks like another Comet of Cassandora trying to intercept these Chaos Warriors. But he's going to walk around them, and that's enough for these units to get completely cut to ribbons. And there we go. So that is a win for Bretonnia and a win for Jontaun. So that is 1-all in this set, which is pretty commendable. This is not an easy matchup for Jontaun here. You know, Bretonnia do really struggle against Warriors of Chaos, getting through all that armor. And Warriors of Chaos just have some brilliant solutions to cavalry. And you can't really go all infantry. Everything's going to get terrified away. It's rough. It is very rough for Bretonnia, but he pulled it out just through excellent micro. All of those beautiful charges and not leaving the cavalry in long enough to take too much damage. And Fey Enchantress working overtime to try and heal everything up and keep them fighting. So it was pretty incredible. I was very surprised by this. But that's the thing with Jontaun. If he's got a good cavalry force, he makes incredible use out of it. He's always been incredibly good at that. So Indypride had his work cut out for him, it seems. So pretty fantastic. 143 kills for the Soul of Damnation. Told you that Hellcannon would put some work in. Unfortunately, that was mostly peasants. But it seems that the peasants, just that overwhelming numbers, they just kept all of this stuff busy so well. It was really impressive. The Foot Squires held out a lot longer than I thought they would. And they really put some work in. Kolek with 146 kills. Lord of the Storm is brilliant. That gets a lot of work done. But when you're outnumbered to this extent, you know, 100 kills on each of these units probably wouldn't have decided the game. It's a little bit ludicrous how many units Jontaun had sort of spare. Unbelievable. Unbelievable fight. So, now we get to see who is going to end up in the final in the next round. It's gone to the third match for these two in this best of 3, which is always great to see. I always love it when it's, you know, down to the wire. Always makes it far more interesting. So, guys, I will meet you there. And here we are in Game 3, the decider for this round, which is very exciting. And as you can see, Jontaun's Wood Elves here seem to be assaulting the White Tower of Hoeth. I don't know what kind of disagreement happened here, but it can't be good. And as you can see, also, the High Elves are in play here. So, once again, Jontaun has a really unfavourable matchup. That is 3 times now. He's just been completely, yeah, caught off guard by the matchups, which is very, very unfair for him. But, you know, if anyone could pull it out, it's Jontaun. So, here you can see he has a front line of Eternal Guard. So, nice wide front line. He's gone with the cheapest infantry he can, though with shields. You can go cheaper without shields, but against High Elves you need that missile resistance. So having all those silver shields in the front line, and it does give them some more melee defense too, so they'll be able to hold longer in melee. It's the best call, I think. So really nice solid front line. And in the back, a ton of War Dancers with Azrai Spears. These guys are so good at killing cavalry. Huge anti-large and armor piercing, and they're very quick. They are very quick indeed, so very useful units to have, but 4 of them is a lot. So he's expecting a lot of cavalry, and he wants to be able to shut them down and protect his back line, which is devastating, this back line. It is incredible. So he has a Hawkeye's Rudakira. These guys are superb. They're the regiment's renowned Way Watchers. So you can see, as they're Way Watchers, they have great armor-piercing missile damage, gigantic range at 190. I mean, that rivals some artillery. It's really impressive. Also, they have Stalk. They can fire while moving. So Stalk means they can't be seen unless they're firing or near something. So they can hide, which is scary. They can hide anywhere. So they're hidden right now. It's very formidable. And because they're the regiment renowned, they do have a couple of extra toys at their disposal. So they have a smoke bomb. So if cavalry does manage to catch up to them, or even just infantry, they can hit the smoke bomb. It'll slow the enemy down a tremendous amount. I mean, minus 76 speed. And 76% charge speed as well. That's huge debuff to speed. So they can just run away again. And because they can fire while moving, they can just shoot back into the unit that they've just caught out with the smoke bomb. So that is very scary indeed. So they are going to get a lot of work done there. And they also have Discouraged as an effect on their missile damage. So when they hit something, they're going to lose a load of leadership. And you lose leadership anyway from being shot at. So that's minus 16, I think minus 8 or 10 for just being shot in general. So they can really just destroy leadership on units, as well as just killing a lot, because they're really, really good at killing things. And so are their younger brothers, these Way Watchers, who, again, they have all those same things apart from the smoke bomb and the Discouraged. Really good missile damage, really good range, and they can stalk. Very scary. And yeah, so that's all the infantry, but we also have a Spellsinger of Shadows on an eagle. As the Glade Lord also has an eagle, they can outrun anything that the High Elves may have. So that is very useful. They can keep out of harm's way as long as they want. But the Shadows, Spellsinger of Shadows, she has Melkoth, so just like in the previous game, really good for slowing down units and getting some damage into them. And the Penundral Pendulum, this is a new one. This is great. This will just cleave through any of the High Elf front line. Things like Spearmen don't have a lot of armor, and this is really good at unarmored combat. It'll kill things very quickly, such as spearmen, so you can really help buckle that front line, and it frees up more of the Eternal Guard for killing cavalry, so very nice there. Also, another little toy is Occam's Mind Razor. This will bestow magic damage, and that will actually negate the physical resist of Dragon Princes if you're fighting something with magic damage. So it also adds weapon damage and armor piercing damage. I'm saying damage a lot. There's a lot of damage involved. But yeah, it's a really good spell to have on any unit, especially if you cast it on top of some War Dancers, on a unit that's been smoke bombed, or even better, hit with a Prey of Anathema. So here, the Glade Lord, the Glady, she has a bow so she can shoot things as she runs around, and she has this ability, which is the Prey of Anathema. This will basically just stop things in place for 16 seconds. They won't be able to move, and it'll lower their missile resistance, which means that these two units will be able to do even more damage to that unit, which is terrifying. So, finally, Indypride's army. Frontline Spearmen, so much like the Eternal Guard, very good holding force. He wants his range and his cavalry to do all the work. So here you can see he has archers in the back line, so quite cheap and cheerful, but they will cut through things like War Dancers very quickly. You don't have to worry too much about heavily armoured units as the Wood Elves. Wood Elves don't have a lot of armour, generally, apart from in their trees, which don't really have the killing power to kill a lot of High Elf units. So it's risky. So you tend to go with the low armoured stuff, and archers can be able to capitalise on that. Obviously, the missile resist in the front line is going to help the Eternal Guard shrug off the archer damage, but there's a lot of units that have no missile resist that are going to hurt, that are going to suffer for this. So also some more spearmen in the back, just to protect the back line. Also, a unit of Dragon Princes being escorted by Teclis here. So Teclis, great utility, a lot of fantastic spells here. So this one, Bound Fiery Convocation. It's similar to Penundral Pendulum in the fact it'll do a lot of damage to unarmoured units, and Wood Elves don't have a lot of armour, so this will do a lot of work if you can just aim it down the front line. Also, the Potion of Shoroid to keep himself healed, Regrowth to heal other units, huge healing. It also adds physical resist, which Occam's Mind Razor can negate, but that healing is very big, and when you have a lot of elite units, you really want that healing. He also has Enfeebling Foe to just basically stop things from working well, which is nice, and Flaming Sword of Ruin, that's going to add magic and fire damage. Fire damage is great insurance against trees, and a Net of Amantok to pin things in place, and there's a lot of things you don't want to kite you. Yeah, Wood Elves are good at kiting, so you want to stop that, and a net will do it. Also, he has the Fireborn, so more fire damage, insurance against trees, especially because all trees are large, and these guys also have an anti-large bonus, so very scary. And, not to be outdone here, he has even more cavalry. So, here you go, some more Dragon Princes over there, and some more Dragon Princes over here. His cavalry is super, super elite. So this is going to hurt horribly. So here, some early fire, hitting the spearmen. Just, frankly, this is what the spearmen are here for. They just soak up that arrow fire. But now the archers are being fired upon. So he wants to shut down the archers, knowing that the archers are going to give his back line a lot of grief. So he wants to shut them down early, and with the huge missile damage of these units, he knows he can get rid of them pretty quickly. But obviously the ammo is better spent on things like the Dragon Princes, but so long as he's got enough spearmen in the back line to hold all this stuff, then he won't need all the ammunition. Whittling down some of these ranged units is worthwhile. But seeing this unit come in, he's going to get some really good hits on, but Indypride is wise just to move, just to keep moving to avoid them getting shot at. But the range on these guys is just unbelievable. And now being shot in the back, they're not going to get the benefit of their shields. So suddenly those Dragon Princes have taken a lot of damage and lost a couple of models very early. But here, the archers now shooting at the Azrai spears. This is tough. I mean, this is exactly what I was talking about. These guys do not have very good missile resistance, unless you use Woven Mist, but that's going to lower melee defense. So suddenly these guys are far less defensive in melee, but they will shrug off a lot of the missile damage. So that is something. But it means they can't really run in and fight the Fireborn yet, because the Fireborn will be able to do a lot of damage. A lot of Dragon Prince in here, a lot of scary units. Melkoth's going down the Dragon Princes, trying to slow them down and ruin their charge. But it's not looking great. So Prey of Anathrema on the Fireborn that is now surrounded by War Dancers. The War Dancer will get a lot of good damage in there, and a lot of archer fire is coming into support. But there are a lot of archers firing back at them, so they can't stay in this fight, because that is not cost effective. Unfortunately though, that is a waste of the Prey of Anathrema. And now, more Dragon Princes, having come out the forest, are getting into the back line, and that is very dangerous for Jontaun. Very dangerous indeed. These Dragon Princes, barely a scratch. I say that, they just took a volley and lost a couple of models. But still, there are still a lot of Dragon Princes on the field, and the front line is starting to buckle. All these Azrai spears are in here trying to do what they can, but it's not looking great. They're not getting supported by a whole lot of units. There's a lot of cheap High Elf spearmen keeping them busy, so the Dragon Princes can charge in without too much hassle. So here the Fireborn being slowed down to allow the Glade Lord to escape, but she took a fair bit of damage on the charge. And now, more damage coming in from the archer fire. Over here, the Azrai Spears have managed to muck up these Dragon Princes, which is definitely a good thing for the Wood Elves here. And it is allowing the Hawkeyes and the Way Watchers to get more damage in to that front line. Especially onto these Fireborn that are really starting to suffer. But they haven't lost a huge amount of models yet. A regrowth will put them in pretty good stead once again. But you can see, just all this archer fire, it's impossible to shut this stuff down without, you know, either more archers able to fire in, or any cavalry that can harass. But when you're facing such heavy cavalry as the Dragon Princes, you can't really risk Wild Riders. They just take too many losses on the charge. So it's not good. It's not good. It's a pretty tough position to be in. The cheap archers of the High Elves really just help dominate this battlefield. They help control the flow of battle. Even though they don't have superior range, these units cost about as much as one Way Watcher. So you can just have overwhelming amounts of fire for very cheap as the High Elves. And you see that? Huge amount of damage on the Azrai Spears. And these are the best tool that Jontaun has to deal with these Dragon Princes in melee. So this is incredibly cost effective. And the Dragonborn, they did get healed up, so they are very comfortable right now. Very comfortable indeed. So they're going to be charging in, buckling the last of these Eternal Guard, so the whole front line has basically been wiped out. And now the High Elves are posturing up with their shields, making another solid line. Excuse me. And the cavalry are just sweeping through everything. A lot of damage has been placed on all of this cavalry, but there is still just so much of it, and there's still enough just cheap infantry to soak up all of this archer fire, and almost win on their own. All these archers be able to get some really significant damage in. The Fireborn once again have been Prey of Anathrema and are being fired upon by all of this excellent armor-piercing missile damage, so this is really going to hurt them. But it might be too little too late. Balance of power slightly in the High Elves' favour, but none of these units can afford to land, so a couple of the units that are actually affecting the balance of power the most aren't really able to be utilised. Here though, beautiful dodge by the Eternal Guard here. They've managed to avoid the fiery convocation, and the High Elves took it instead, which is a beautiful play. Really cool to see. And here, the Eternal Guard are actually winning in this engagement, but they're so injured that a couple of cavalry charges, they were unbraced there so they can take the full brunt of it. They're not going to last long against all this. More Dragon Princes coming in, and the Glade Lord is stuck in this. She is really stuck. So the Spellsinger Shadows trying to get in here to stop these archers from firing, so that these Hawkeyes and these Way Watchers can finish off all these Dragon Princes. More Dragon Princes are coming though. There's just too many directions he has to fire in, and there's too much pressure from other sides. Here you can see the Glade Lord is trying to escape, but without any way to heal, she is in a very precarious position. Amazing though, the War Dancers did manage to punch through that line unaccosted, and they're able to pin down some of these units. Fireborn still going, 23 models. Unbelievable considering the amount of fire that they've had to deal with. So here, the Dragon Princes have been smoke bombed, but it might be too late for the Hawkeyes. They're just not able to pin them down long enough or escape. And the War Dancers are a little bit slow to get in here. So now, plenty of ammo left, but not enough models. So although they still have 9 shots, it's only 9 times 14 rather than 9 times 60 that it should be if they were healthy. Sorry, 45 I believe it is. Anyway, it's not good. Dragon Princes have been scared away, but that might be too much damage that the Hawkeyes have taken. They won't be able to withstand all of these different charges. So over here, more Shadow Magic on the Fireborn to try and stop them. And amazingly, these War Dancers are holding out against all this with the Eternal Guard. They are doing a fine job holding this line, but still so many archers that he can't pin down. The Spellsinger is trying to come in to pin them down a bit and do some damage, but the cavalry can just immediately charge into the Spellsinger and free up these archers again. It is very, very tough. So here, the Spellsinger being chased away, and the Glady, the Glade Lord, the female Glade Lord, Glady for short, she's in a real trouble. She's almost breaking. Just from this missile fire, she is nearly dead. She just doesn't have the armor to deal with the amount of arrows, you know? These guys aren't armor piercing, but you don't need it against a Glady on an Eagle. She has barely any armor at 50. It is not much. In fact, you know, it's not much more than the Eternal Guard. So, that's pretty grim. That's pretty grim. So cavalry still coming, amazing, the Fireborn still totally healthy, and there's just not enough of a line. Any charge into any of this is going to break them almost immediately, because they just don't have the health left. So, one more Prey of Anathrema, but it could be too late. There's almost no arrows left. 1 shot for that unit, 3 for these. So, not many shots left to fire into these Fireborn, and there's not much other strength left on the battlefield. Over here, there are some fairly healthy Azrai Spears, though, but considering how much ammunition all these archers still have, they're not going to be able to get into a fight safely anymore. So, Waywatcher's trying to retreat. The Fireborn, not Dragonborn, and the Dragon Princes left after having shattered those War Dancers, and they're running out of threads. They are really running out of threads, and now 2 shots left with the Hawkeyes, so that's only 24 arrows left on that unit. The other unit has run out completely. So here, it looks like they're going to get healed up some more as well, so another regrowth on that unit of Dragon Princes. And at this point, Jontaun knows it is impossible. It is impossible to win. And he backs out. Real pity. Three awful matchups in a row. But, let's not say Indypride didn't play brilliantly here. This was a fantastic build. It didn't give the Wood Elves an inch. That defensive front line, all the arrows, really affordable but really cost effective in this matchup, and just the huge amount of cavalry, too much to be able to stop. Usually you'd see maybe a couple of Dragon Princes and they'd get hit by the Prey of Anathrema and then shot to pieces, and that unit would basically be wiped out and you can move on with your life. But when there's 4, you just don't have enough damage to split up between them, and they're going to kill everything else on the field pretty easily. So without anything with mass to stop those charges and to pin them in place, the Azrai Spears just get bowled over far too often, and it means you just can't capitalize enough. You know, even with Melkos Mystifying Miasma, the Prey of Anathrema, it's not enough for 4. 4 units of cavalry is immense. It is immensely powerful. And everything else, just cheap, knowing that be cost effective. These guys held things in place, and the archers were able to just kill far more than, you know, the cost to themselves. Is unbelievable. Really cost effective. And frankly, he knew that with all this cavalry, he'd be able to defend his back line from anything the Wood Elves could throw at it. You know, if the Wood Elves brought a load of cavalry themselves, these units were going to win out. So he knew he didn't need Loath Sea Guard or anything fancy, just standard archers. That's all he needed for that. And with Teclis being able to net things down and heal things a tremendous amount with regrowth, it was pretty much GG from the beginning. I think the matchup just favoured the High Elves too much here, and Indypride really took advantage of all of the Wood Elves' weaknesses in order to achieve victory here. So that means that Indypride is now in the final against the Gobbo King. So that is going to be a tense fight, and I think it's one that a lot of people have been requesting. So it's going to be really good to see how that pans out. So, Jontaun of Total Brohammer, go check him out on YouTube. He plays a lot of very competitive games, and of course he was in 2nd place in the previous Everchosen. So he really knows what he's doing. So definitely go check that out for more Total War content. Also, Indypride, we'll see him again in the final, but be sure to check out Indypride of Milk and Cookies Total War on YouTube. And yeah, for more Total War stuff. It's all very exciting. So, I guess we will see you in the finals.